Thanks, Ujjwala. Okay, then we start, huh? Friends and colleagues, Bayo, Bano, Mitro, Dosto, welcome to the 88th webinar of INHAF's series of webinars on rethinking city. As you well know, it started a long time ago, about 2.5 years ago. And we have debated over 30 urban themes and sub-themes and have had over 400 urban experts, specialists, professionals, administrators, community groups, sharing this platform and sharing their ideas, views, and perspectives. Today is the 88th, and it is on challenges and social housing projects. And therefore, we're not talking generally, we're talking about perspectives of implementers of Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana, and that is across Maharashtra. We're also not spreading ourselves too thin, I understand. And that will be very specific. We're talking about specific projects, and that I think is a big advantage. We tend to kind of generalize too much, and I think time and again such specific projects are very helpful. I understand, and I hope Pratima ji would not let me down. I hope this is first of the 2 or 3 webinars that we are planning on the subject, and and I think this is in association with Shelter Associates, and therefore we are very grateful to Pratima ji for making time for this event. She's very busy. She's very hard to catch. She doesn't give a damn that an old man is trying to reach her. But thank you very much that you found time and arranged this one. And I understand this is going to be a very useful debate, because besides Mani, who is a guru to everyone on housing, including me and Pratima ji, we also have Sandhya, we have Ashish ji, and we have I don't think I'm going to participate too much, I think, on the debate, but I think we have lots of good people who could talk about the project. But before we start the discussion today on Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana and implement specific projects, let me kind of take some time and tell you a little bit about the webinar series, because not to talk about I think webinar series is to miss wood for the tree. It's very important that we at least we and all those who are part of this series do not forget why we are doing it, what we're doing. So let me tell you briefly about INHAF's webinar series on Rethinking City. And let me tell you that this underlying assumptions based on which this particular webinar series started, there are 4 assumptions. First one is this, that despite being engines of growth and centers of culture, technology, knowledge, and global attention and investment, our cities are not in the pink of health. And that is, be that a small city or a big industrial or commercial district town or state capital, whatever, they are not in pink of health. And issue is, it's not only environment, it's not only water, it's not only governance, it's not only planning, it's not only slums, it's not only housing. Just take anything, and we have a huge, really problems, in that we are encountering. The second assumption is this. The first is this, that we essentially have problems in the manner in which we look at urbanization, urban challenge, and meeting it. The second one is that the cities as they are and the way they are growing and developing do not look like meeting the challenge of unprecedented urbanization India is witnessing. That there is not much evidence to suggest that we know exactly what to do with this challenge. It neither looks like providing safe and healthy quality of living to 870 million people who will be there in cities in 30 more years, that is by 2050, almost double of today's population, or it does not look like delivering 7 to 8% growth the country expects to get rid of poverty and emerging as an economic power. So second thing is just that not only we have problems, it doesn't look like, I think, we having pathways where we could take care of, enormous growth in population, almost doubling the size, an expectation of 7 to 8% growth, and 7 to 8% growth, if it has to happen, it's to happen through city, because cities are engines of growth. And on both fronts, we seem to have problems. The third assumption is the government effort, and government is making an enormous amount of effort, no one can deny it. Government alone is not adequate to ensure healthy, livable, productive, inclusive, and sustainable cities. Government alone cannot do it. There's no way it could happen. And the fourth one is that there's a wider society. The human capital outside the government system has the required skills, required knowledge, required experience, and even motivation to contribute meaningfully in search of alternative approaches and new solutions. So what one is saying is this, that this webinar series is a part of, and therefore, this webinar series is part of a wider national societal effort aimed to bringing not only fresh ideas and new perspectives, but also new voices and a new collectivism, new togetherness, new partnership, and new energy in articulating the need for and ways to rethink our cities, both redefining the urban challenge and finding more effective ways to addressing it. And therefore, it is taking the urban challenge to people. It is preparing them to engage and contribute. That's preparing people to engage and contribute. It's making the urban development challenge a societal challenge. And I like this word very much. From the very beginning, we are trying to make this challenge a societal challenge, a people's challenge, along with that of the governments. We don't say it's only government's challenge, it's people's challenge as well. And 2 years since the inception, the webinar series had over 85 episodes and has addressed more than 40 themes, as I said earlier. The series is conceived and presented by INHAF, which is a network of professional civil society actors and others engaged in habitat development related activities. And it would be wrong to say this is INHAF's series alone, because this has been possible because large number of people have come in as partners, have contributed enormously to idea content and to organizing all this. So that is the kind of background that we're trying to make the urban challenge a people's challenge. And this particular platform is generating ideas, building, solidarity, building people together. With that sort of longish introduction, and I can never talk small unless you know very well. So hand it over to Mani to handle this today's webinars. Thank you very much, Mani, again, Pratima ji again for taking the initiative, and Sandhya and Ashish ji. Let's start. Let me hear what you have to say on this. Thank you.
Thank you, Kirti Bhai. Yeah, it's wonderful to be back in this forum webinar series of INHAF. We really struggle to say no to Kirti Bhai because we consider him the Bhishma Pitama of habitat and housing, not just in India, global south, but then across the world. So when Pratima ji came up with this, like we had no choice but to say yes and get going into working on this. But what is interesting about this session is that Kirtibai has been saying that we need to do an elaborate session on PMAY alone, and we have been resisting that temptation because PMAY as a subject in itself, Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana as a subject in itself is a big thing, and like it's very difficult to package it in one session or a few sessions. It's fairly large. So one attraction of this session is we are addressing one piece of the larger puzzle here in this session, and we are also limiting ourselves to one geography, which is the state of Maharashtra. So that kind of brings focus to this. So to that extent, we are very excited to be part of it. And because we have not done a session on PMAY standalone in this series, and for the benefit of whoever has joined just some of these sessions and not fully conversant, I'll probably start off with a brief couple of slide introductions on PMAY as such, the urban mission, and then we will dive into the panelists. So I'm sharing my screen. I hope this comes up. It's full screen. Are you able to see my screen? Thank you. Yeah, so here we are in this session. We are actually going to discuss the implementation of PMAY, especially in the state of Maharashtra. As Indian Housing Federation, we have been working on the vision of our founder director, Sri Vishnu Swaminathan, of reducing inequalities faced by socially and economically weaker sections of the society by enabling access to housing. And that is what has brought us into this space. And in the course of our work in the past few years, we have been fortunate to work with all the three panelists who are present in this panel, and specifically on the projects which they're going to present. So we have been happy to learn from them in terms of what they have been going through, and we are happy to contribute to whatever we need to achieve together in terms of these projects. As we dive into PMAY, Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana Urban, as we all know, like there are two missions, Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana Urban, and then there is a Gramin version of that. Today we are talking about the urban mission. It was launched in 2015 with a larger objective, which started off with a demand survey exercise. The overall demand was assessed at about 1.12 crores. And the solution was to be provided across 4 different verticals. So it's in some sense 4 different missions as such, coming together, bouquet of options, which the states and beneficiaries need to choose and arrive at solutions. The first vertical is in situ slum redevelopment, where by leveraging land as a resource, we will get to see a variant of this in today's panel. So the whole idea is that we have slums situated in tenable lands, which can be kind of rehabilitated, redeveloped in an in situ manner by leveraging land as a resource. In that, the government of India grant is 1 lakh average per dwelling unit. Of course, the state governments can add more. The second vertical is credit linked subsidy scheme. It's an interest subsidy option given on housing loans, originally launched with an EWS and LIG version. Again, the definition of income segments, economically weaker section is families with up to 3 lakhs per annum income, defined in 2015. LIG is 3 lakhs to 6 lakhs. So it's an interest subvention scheme on a loan of up to 6 lakhs, where 6.5% subsidy is provided. In 2017, a variant of that, CLSS for MIG, was launched, which ran for about 2.5 years until March 2021. And that was an interest subvention scheme for MIG1 and MIG2 with a maximum loan of 9 lakhs and 12 lakhs. The third vertical is affordable housing in partnership, which is more greenfield housing happening in peripherals of the cities, mostly where new housing stock is added to the cities, where people without houses are given subsidized housing, 1.5 lakh subsidy from the national government, and state governments add typically 50,000, 1 lakh, or any other differential amount on a state specific basis. The fourth vertical, which turned out to be the most successful vertical, is beneficiary led construction, where someone has a piece of land with a kacha house, gets a subsidy to get a pakka house built. Again, 1.5 lakhs from Government of India and additional sums from state government. So the beneficiaries get the monies, and typically plinth, lintel, roof, and completion stage. In 4 installments, they get the house completed. So if we see the overall national picture, we are the original mission was to run until March 2022. The urban mission, due to reasons, is mainly on account of COVID coming in, which kind of delayed completion in projects and in terms of housing construction, has been extended till December 2024. The CLSS vertical has been capped and it is ended. The EWS LIG version ended in March 2022, and MIG version ended in March 2021. So all India, we are looking at 119 lakhs or 1.2 crores sanctions, 1.12 crores of houses grounded, and 75 lakh houses completed. So as we speak, we are at 63% completion, and we still have close to 18 months to get the balance completed. The larger idea is fresh sanctions are not happening. Existing sanctions and grounded houses are taken to completion, and that is where the focus is currently. So if we look at vertical wise performance, we have a BLC contributing 61% of the sanctions, CLSS 21%, AHP 15%, and ISSR 3%. In terms of completion, we have BLC having the maximum completion, CLSS contributing 33% of the completion, AHP 10%, and ISSR 7%. So let us unpack the numbers because as you see here, the CLSS number kind of slightly makes the overall completion numbers different, as otherwise the pattern is usually different. So if we unpack the numbers without the CLSS numbers, we have about 95 lakh sanctions, 87 lakhs grounded, and about 50 lakhs completed, which is about 53% completion. Now, again, if we split it vertical wise, we have BLC, which is 77% of the overall sanction numbers, completion achieved is 75%. AHP, which is 19% of overall numbers, completion achieved is 15%. And ISSR, which is 4% overall numbers, completion achieved is 11%. So here is where I think like the relevance of today's discussion comes into picture, because if we really see the overall vertical wise completed to sanctions, BLC at 51 and AHP at 42, we see a very clear skew towards 2 verticals, which is BLC and CLSS, which is where we are seeing like substantial numbers and completion. But then what is unique about these 2 verticals vis-a-vis AHP and ISSR is like, while all verticals are counted as projects when the projects are approved at the DPR stage, BLC and CLSS are typically individual beneficiaries trying to get their solutions done. They get a house built, you get completion. So it's predominantly driven by the beneficiary. Whereas the real challenge comes on typical projects, the projects in the traditional sense, which is AHP and ISSR, where you need to get everything working at the same time. All the parameters should move at the same time. All the beneficiaries should be contributing the money at the same time. And you need to have the cash flow happening at an overall project level. So this is where getting the numbers up and running in AHP has been a challenge. And in terms of typical construction timelines, even theoretically, we are looking at anywhere between 24 months and 36 months for completion in AHP and ISSR, while BLC is typically like 6 months to 9 months. Now let us dive into Maharashtra numbers. Maharashtra overall has 14 lakhs sanctioned, 11 lakhs grounded, and 8 lakhs completed. And as you can see again, CLSS has a big chunk of Maharashtra numbers, which is 6.25. So if we remove that and look at these numbers, we are looking at somewhere around 8 lakhs sanctioned, 5 lakhs grounded, and about 2 lakhs completed, which is which kind of clearly skews the way we look at the numbers, right? Like, so for a state like Maharashtra, which has huge demand, huge shortfall, and huge work, there is still quite a lot of ground to be covered, and which is where I think the panelists here in this panel are really working towards on specific projects which are actually getting implemented in Maharashtra. So we are going to see their actual experiences. This is not theory. This is not a kind of an idea. These are real people working on real projects on ground, and all three of them are somewhere midway into their project implementation in all these three projects. All these three projects are not in large cities or metro cities, but then they are typically in tier 1.5, tier 2 towns. They are complicated projects which kind of gives a sense of what kind of challenges and innovations we are going to look for in this discussion. So without taking too much of time on this, I will invite the first panelist, Pratima Ji, who is the founder of Shelter Associates. You'll get to see her detailed profile on the chat. But then Pratima Ji, over to you. Welcome, Gondre Nagar.
Thank you, Manikandan. I would really like to start by thanking Kirti ji, because I don't think I would have brought this together had it not been for his persistence. And thank you so much, Kirti ji, because we do need people like you, to keep pushing us to do sessions like this, which I think are great value additions to what you're already doing. When you thrust this thing on me and gave me the freedom to choose and present it, in whatever ways I deemed fit, I thought that itself was, really generous of you. So it got me thinking, and I said, instead of just talking about what our experiences have been, it would be wonderful if we could get three people who are already working in tier 2 cities, and we are all struggling to get these projects off the ground, and some of it is like sort of midway. It would be wonderful at this stage and see what have been the processes, the challenges
Sorry, Pratima Ji,
we
like
have been at it.
your audio is disturbed. Like, so if you can, be. There's some disturbance.
No, Pratima ji, we can't hear you very clearly.
No, you probably can hear yourself. We can't hear you.
I don't know why this has happened. I could show you all perfectly.
Okay, so this is my suggestion. Yeah, you can try one more time. Yeah.
Okay, sure. So we can suggest that Sandhya start the presentation.
Sorry, Pratima Ji, like, no, like you'll maybe have to replace your earphones. While you do that, what I can request is if I can request Sandhya to come in and present her presentation while you replace your audio, please. Earphones. Sandhya, sorry about the short notice, please come.
No worries. Okay. Thank you so much. I'll have to thank Pratima ji for inviting me to come and speak. And of course, the request came from KP ji. So like Mani was saying, it is not an option to say no. But I think having a discussion around challenges and what we are facing is very valuable. And like Pratima ji was saying, we don't take the time to really connect with our peers because we're so busy with our work and the project work itself. So I'm without taking up too much time on the introductions, I'll just share my screen and we can get started. So I understand the introductions to each of us are in the chat panel, if I'm not wrong. So I don't need to do an individual introduction, correct?
Yeah, that's right. So we'll get
Okay.
it up soon.
All right. Just diving directly into it. Community Design Agency, we are Mumbai-based architects, engineers, artists as well, placemakers, working alongside the marginalized to improve inadequate built environments. And the idea is that the overall sort of broad idea is that an inclusive world is where every human enjoys access to vibrant, safe, and healthy places to live, work, and play. Broadly, the kinds of projects we work on are the slum rehabilitation, which I'm going to talk about today, neighborhood regeneration. This is around existing neighborhoods, but low-income neighborhoods, to really work alongside the residents to improve what they already have. And we've also worked alongside workers in the informal economy to bring about awareness about access to safe work environments. The Sanjay Nagar Slum Redevelopment Project, which is the topic of discussion. I'll get started with the primary idea behind how we approach this project. So I'm going to use World Bank statistics for a lack of valid statistics that at the moment. So 169 million people live in urban India, live without access to safe. And I'm just going to stop for a second because I think there is, okay, there you go. Can you see my screen properly, the full screen without any pop-ups? Okay, I'm sorry about that.
Yes, yes.
169 million people, we're estimating roughly that makes up for 34 million families. Now, when we look at this as 34 million families, the immediate instinct for government and policymakers and even sort of the private market to respond to it is that we're going to have to build 34 million homes. But our idea is that what if we look at this as 135,000 communities who live in slum-like conditions across the country? What would it mean to build for them? The theory of change primarily being that, how do we tap into the robust social capital that exists in informal communities, which have been built over decades of, coexisting together and facing challenges and celebrating together as a community. And that the redevelopment efforts actually acknowledge this as a strength, the social cohesion and the resilience that that we see in marginalized communities, and use that to come up with policy, with ideas and solutions to build better. So fundamentally, we're asking three primary questions. It's for the purpose of this particular deck, and like Mani was saying, it's such a huge complicated topic to discuss, but we're going to focus on these three things primarily. One is, what would our approach be if our target was to build thousands of communities and not millions of homes? What would the design and the implementation process look like? And what would the financial mechanisms be in order to achieve this? The context of Sanjay Nagar, it's located in Ahmednagar city, which is about 250 kilometers from Mumbai. It's a semi-arid place. Just to give a little bit of context for our audience, Ahmednagar is where our freedom fighters were imprisoned at the Ahmednagar fort, including Jawaharlal Nehru and all the others, for 2 years. So historically, it's a very significant city. This particular slum is one of 22, and out of which 17 are notified. And what makes this particular community very unique is that there are 22 different communities, including different religions and different castes, who live together. In fact, the very first people who were located on this piece of land were leprosy-affected families who were given homes in the mid-70s by the central government. And then community members from, just one moment, I'm so sorry, just one moment. I'll have to apologize for that. We are a dog-friendly office, and suddenly, like, we had our pet scratching at the door. So this particular community was relocated from that stadium that you see to the right of the screen. They were moved in the middle of the night. The city moved them. So the families have been building this community for the last 40 to 45 years. Just a closer look at the settlement itself, it's not as dense, but still it's pretty tight with nearly 1,000 people living here on just 2 acres of land. And the existing structures, we have about 200 of them, a little over 200 of them, and 298 families qualify for this for homes as such for the under the project. Now, what we also found is many of these homes, some of the families had larger homes, some of them had smaller homes. So this all has to do sort of with how the power structures evolve within informal settlements. Now, when we look at the neighborhood right up front, we can see what's lacking in terms of physical infrastructure, right? We have unsafe dwellings, not enough light and ventilation inside the homes, lack of, good services and infrastructure, which the city struggles to keep up in this neighborhood. And I would like to point out, this is a very good image to talk about it, is that it sits on black cotton soil. Black cotton soil is a soil that's where, it's basically agricultural land. So it's practically a swamp, which makes for very complicated construction as well. But what we learned through our process of engaging with the community is that it's a place of robust social infrastructure. The good things that are in the community is also sort of the strong social bonds that have evolved over the last 40 to 45 years. It's really important to know that, to understand this, I find in my experience of having worked with these types of communities, is because tapping into these aspects of informal settlements really helps with not only the process of rebuilding, but also to build into that sense of ownership and sense of belonging once the project is complete. Our approach is basically taking a very immersive tactic. So we go where the community are. We organize meetings when it is conducive for the community members. Building trust and consensus is very, very critical, though it's one of the most difficult things to do. And for sustained success throughout the project, we engage with whom we call community representatives. These are the youth of the community who help us by being the bridge between architects and planners and the people implementing the project and the families themselves. I'm sure all of our other panelists will touch upon this as well, is one of the many reasons of also a lack of access to homes and to various government programs for informal, so marginalized communities, is just the lack of understanding of what paperwork is required and what it means to qualify for these policies. So we worked with the youth to bridge that gap as well. We have taken a very pretty intense participatory approach to this, even from the very beginning. Before we could come up with the overall site plan, the community was very, very adamant that they wanted all of their homes to be situated on the ground floor. And they wanted 298 homes on just 2 acres of land. So we basically told them if they succeeded in showing us how it could be organized that way on a piece of land, we'll build it exactly that, like they wanted. And they spent an entire afternoon trying to figure it out and arrived at the same conclusion. So we played the role of facilitators. So instead of just being the architects and deciding everything for them, it was really important for the community to understand what choices they had to make it successful. So we started at the larger community level, and then we came down to the individual building level. And we have 8 buildings as part of the redevelopment of this project. And each of the buildings we were able to finalize only once the families decided who was going to be whose neighbor. Again, we stayed away from the lottery system because it does disrupt the social fabric of these communities, and that can have long-lasting challenges, as we are seeing on our project here in Mumbai, where we're working with families who have moved into public housing in a randomized way. And then we came down to the individual family unit itself. The way we had designed the unit modules was such that it was allowing for some kind of personalization and customization within. For example, in our first building, 3 brothers chose to live together. So they connected their homes through a staircase internally. Some of them chose to, within that, they chose to not have all 3 kitchens, but just have 2 kitchens instead, as an example. It was really important to sit with the individual families as well, because it gave us an opportunity to help them really understand the design process, the construction process, and the financial mechanisms as to what, and basically what it would take to build rebuild their neighborhood. Now, one of the key guideposts for us is that when we design and build for communities on the margins, we always ask ourselves, are these places that we create, that we would live, that, you know, if we would live in these spaces that we have created? And that answer and that response needs to be a yes. So what came out of this design process is we have 8 buildings organized around courtyards, 298 homes across these structures. We have a community center, health center, and all the sustainability components, you know, your rainwater harvesting, rooftop gardens, your the construction, the bricks that were made, also, you know, made from industrial waste in Ahmednagar by a manufacturer of just about, you know, 5 kilometers from this community, etc. So this is the existing neighborhood, and this is the vision that we came up with alongside the community of what these new structures and buildings would look like. We paid attention to, again, like I pointed out earlier, the good things that work in this particular community to ensure that there is that sort of intergenerational living that continues. And the community center being the heart of the neighborhood, which could become a multi-purpose space. Of course, livelihoods is one of the biggest concerns that the families had, and we have, with them, we have tried to incorporate that within the redevelopment plan. And to promote health, so we have internal courtyards and external courtyards that allows for cross ventilation and sunlight throughout the day, and really good air circulation. The community roofs, like I had mentioned earlier, we're trying to maximize the space as much as possible by activating it for, you know, having educational components there, having rooftop gardens, edible gardens, to use it as an opportunity for bringing awareness around nutrition and nourishment. So the next part I would like to touch upon briefly, and I'm hoping that as part of this discussion we could dwell on it a bit longer, are the financial mechanism for this particular project. This slum redevelopment project qualified under the affordable housing mission of Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana, only because the amount of subsidy that was available for affordable housing was higher than the in situ slum redevelopment vertical. So this particular project has the government support through the Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana. The city is contributing land. This particular land belongs to the Ahmednagar Municipal Corporation. They've also agreed to support us with basic services. The homeowners are contributing a fixed amount towards each of their homes. And we have philanthropic support as well, which includes for design, technical, and social services, and a gap in the construction funds that's being raised through CSR, as well as philanthropic channels. Now, for the financial inclusion, what was very frustrating was that traditional banks were not willing to lend to the families living in this particular slum. So in collaboration with Rangde, it's a peer-to-peer lending non-banking financial institution based out of Bangalore. We developed a home loan product, which included also financial literacy as well as an opportunity to really have access, to provide the families access to formal banking and to help them build credit in the future as well. This is something which we are reevaluating as we continue to build on the project, and hoping that now that we've finished phase 1 of this initiative, that the formal banks would take note, because one of the limitations of non-banking financial institutions is that they cannot get a repayment term limit over 3 years. So the key learnings that we have had as it sort of links to the project financing is that the need to build consensus among resident community members. It's absolutely critical to understand their lived experiences really well and how that can inform the project. And we know from our experience that this creates a greater sense of ownership amongst the community. And based on the residents' capacities to pay, we would like to see possibilities of facilitating long-term loans such that they're able to access financing in a much more equitable manner. And the question we are asking is, can this impact the quality of spaces built for them? Because there is so much focus on categorizing slum redevelopment projects and projects for economically weaker section as low cost housing. We are finding that it has its own challenges and issues, especially if these are existing slums. It's very difficult to say low cost because slums are invariably on undesirable land in the city, which means that the construction costs will invariably be higher because of the poor soil quality. And a blended finance model, and like Kirti said, the government alone cannot solve for this. So what other innovations can we look towards? Social impact investment is something which is really caught a lot of traction in the last decade or so. And we are finding that the way they are structured somehow less, how do you say it? Somehow not as stringent, less stringent than your formal banking institutions. We're wondering if we could, this could make slum redevelopment economically viable. So to break it down, we are. Oh, sorry. Yes. One of us help.
Kirti bhai, you'll have to mute your line. Kirti bhai, yeah, go ahead, Sandhya.
So, so to really clearly understand, how we are looking at this is that, what if we say that different financing options are available at different stages of the project? We were able to do this project because we had backing of philanthropic capital, very patient capital, to engage with the community and do a pretty robust participatory process with them. This really allows us to prepare the community for the redevelopment, which we all know is incredibly challenging and life-changing. We are saying that we're going to go in and completely not redo, but we're going to change the way the land that they have occupied for so many decades. We're going to change the urban environment of how, what they have built over many, many years of having lived together. All of this it takes time, not only to build consensus, but also to get the community both practically and emotionally prepared for such an endeavor. From a land and housing perspective, of course, the existing ISSR says, you have additional FSI, and then you can use that to generate profits to supplement the homes of the slum dwellers. But one of the things which we know could be fairly controversial is saying that along with the profit that's generated, what if we make it such that the slum dwellers also put in money into the project? And not, with the current model, not to say that they're going to get the homes for free, because we believe that this could help improve the quality of the housing exponentially. And what this does is improving the quality of housing also makes it very attractive for lending institutions, because as difficult as it is to sort of, accept the practical nature of how the housing sector works, it is very attractive collateral.
Right now, banks also hesitate for providing loans for low-income housing is because the quality of the housing is being called into question. Government subsidies will continue to need to be a part of this. Basic household services, municipalities, especially tier 2 and tier 1.5, as Mani was saying, do have the capacities to support successful projects like these. Now, coming to the point about making these projects climate adaptable and ensuring that all of the social infrastructure is built in a much more sustainable manner, we believe that CSR can play a very important role. And we also believe that we should not be placing the burden of making these projects climate resilient on these families themselves, because it's an established fact that they are not the ones who contribute to climate change as much as the privileged of different cities do. So as part of phase 1, we have built 33 homes. The community members were like, what do you mean by all of this? We want to see one before all of us sort of dive into this process. We have we handed off keys about a year ago, a little over a year ago, to the first 33 families. The homes are, designed such that, like I was saying, lots of sunlight, architecture that is sustainable. In the post-occupancy, which I'll talk about in a minute, it's having great impact on the quality of life of these families. A view of what each apartment unit looks like. So for the post-occupancy, we are also making this again takes resources, by the way, and this is really not built into the construction cost or even the project cost generally. Operations and maintenance is also a huge challenge. We've been working with the Indian Housing Federation on this part of our project to see how to build models that can be replicated as well, along with the model that we have for rebuilding this community. So as part of the post-occupancy, we have been doing thermal comfort analysis, and we have found that these homes are 5 to 6 degrees cooler during different climate, during different seasons of the year. And the community has really taken over ownership. So when we finished this project last year, we couldn't quite arrive at the color for the building. So just like any architect's dream, we left it white. But a year on, finally we got around to repainting it. The community chose the color, and they've taken great care of the building. You can walk in any time of the day, any time of the week. This is how you will find the neighborhood. And one of the things that really concerned me was that open patch of land. As we were preparing for phase 2 of the project, where we now need to build seven of the remaining buildings to house 265 families, we were quite concerned about the open land, because we know the endless stories of how it gets occupied by, how it's used for throwing trash or for the purpose of storage, because it's never enough storage in our homes. The families went ahead and planted edible gardens. And this was really, we didn't have any direct participation in this. They just saw that they had this opportunity to use that piece of land, and they've been planting seasonal vegetables. So for us, from a community participation perspective, we have succeeded. So in conclusion, we have learned, the learnings have been immense just finishing this one building. And really our focus right now is to figure out the financial sustainability of slum redevelopment, like the way we have demonstrated through the Sanjay Nagar Slum Redevelopment Project. Thank you.
Thank you, Sanjay ji. I think I was fortunate to be part of the inauguration of the Swapna Purti. So yeah, I could see the happiness in the faces of those 33 families on that day. Like, it was a real festival for them, for those families. Great job with that, and all the best for the rest of the 265. You have certain questions which you can answer on the Q&A, while I'll hand over to Pratima ji to kind of come in for Bondre Nagar and our larger experiences on PMAY.
Yeah, thank you very much. I just hope my net doesn't give way. So I'll straight away dive into my presentation. Let me just share the screen. Is it visible? Yeah.
Yes,
Okay.
Pratima ji, go ahead.
So, so I would like to really give a little bit of a context, because it's been almost a 2 decades journey for us in the housing space. And though I will be talking about Bondre Nagar, I just thought I will give a little bit of a background of what we have done in the past, which has also led us to this Kolhapur project. So our housing journey actually started in 96, 98, where we did our first project in Pune, which was a relocation project for 56 families who moved about 1 kilometer from where they were because they were on reserve land, which needed to be cleared. And I think it continues to still be very unique and the only of its kind in Pune city, where people actually contributed to their construction by providing their own labor. And it's been over 2.5 decades now that this project stands, and most of the people, original owners, are still living there. The second one was again a relocation project where Kamgar Putra, 175 houses, decided to move almost 7 kilometers from where they were, because they were flood affected kind of families. Every year in monsoon, they had to be shifted out. And so this recurring problem led them to choose a piece of land very strategically where livelihoods will not be affected. And again, that was under the Valmiki Ambedkar Awas Yojana that we were able to successfully implement this. The third project was between 2010 and 15, which I think in a way gave us the impetus for our Kolhapur project, because it laid the foundation with a citywide approach where we looked at all the slums in Sangli Miraj, created a spatial database, understood how many slums were very vulnerable, and how we could come out with a rehabilitation package where you wouldn't have to move people who had to move not more than 2 to 3 kilometers from where they were. So that citywide approach was lauded by the government of India. It became part of the Rajiv Awas Yojana. One of the policies, one of the salient feature of that policy was that cities must invest in a data-driven approach so that they can come out with short-term and long-term strategies. And I thought this was wonderful, because they were delighted with the way we had handled the entire relocation and a rehabilitation package of Sangli Miraj. But one of the things that in our excitement to do that project, which we did not focus on, was actually documenting it very, very aggressively. But we got that opportunity in Kolhapur. And to set the context again in how did we land up in Kolhapur, actually we didn't start with this housing project. We came to Kolhapur in 2015 with a very robust sanitation program, which was called One Home, One Toilet, where we were trying to see how we could facilitate toilets in every individual house. Bondre Nagar happened to be the first settlement where we implemented this project, where we took it from 4% to 95% homes having a home toilet. This was hugely successful. It was also a little offbeat, the project, because there were no drainage networks, but we managed to come out with a very robust model, and people were delighted that they had a toilet in their house. And of course, as we continued with the rest of the projects in Kolhapur city, working in other settlements, the PMAY was announced, and the city hired a consultant to prepare a DPR for a holistic citywide approach to rehabilitation of the poor of Kolhapur, and selected Bondre Nagar as one of the pilot settlements. So what happened was that Bondre Nagar people, I think, were not very aware of what kind of project was being proposed for them. It turned out to be something which was going to be high-rise, and something which absolutely did not work well with them at all. But luckily for them, the project got rejected by the state government of India. And they came to us saying that we definitely want shelter associates to be involved in our pilot, if at all our settlement is to be chosen for this particular project. So we started, we had taken a conscious decision that we would only be doing sanitation, since this was our window to really make full use of the opportunities that were coming our way. and knowing such few people were in the sanitation space, we decided to dedicate all the 8 or 9 years to sanitation. But when Bondrinagar people approached us, we couldn't say no. And we said, let's dive straight into housing again. So we took a look at the DPR. And I'm going to be very candid over here. It was not very easy to get access to that DPR. And we were asked to look at the DPR only in their office because it was not even in the public domain. We were not allowed to even Xerox it so that we could read it, at length. But one thing that came out very, very clearly was that Bondrinagar was on the edge of the city. You can see in the map. And it had been taken up under the affordable housing vertical. We also realized that every other settlement in the city that qualified for rehabilitation was under the affordable housing sector of the PMAY. And we were very surprised because we started using the parameters that we normally use when we look at a slum. We look at the neighborhood, we look at what's happening around it, what are the land values, what are the kind of development plan rules that get applicable. So a very holistic approach is taken. We noticed that it had the lowest land value according to the Ready Reckoner. And, when the DPR was submitted, the actual demarcation of the plot had not been done. So when that was put in place, it looked like 22 families out of 77, out of 84 families would get affected by this, which meant, 22% of the families would get affected because the plot had shrunk. Largely because there was an 18-meter wide road in the proposed DP, and part of the settlement was on a private land. So we were rather surprised that the detailed project report actually had 2 G+7 kind of structures for in-situ rehabilitation of Bondrinagar community. And it had a saleable component which was going up to 12 stories, which would generate the funds to cross-subsidize this. We realized that this would never see the light of the day because Bondrinagar is almost in the middle of nowhere. Very little development around it, low land values, and no builder would even get attracted to doing this kind of a project. So we started working with the community and started designing the whole housing project with their complete involvement. And luckily what happened was, as we were looking at Bondrinagar, we got an opportunity to come out with a citywide social housing research project in Kolhapur, which was supported by the A.T. Chandra Foundation, because they were very keen to see how we could come out with a strategy for looking at all the settlements within the city. At this point, I would like to say that, we had a lot of data in place for all the settlements in Kolhapur because we had conducted GIS-based poverty mapping to understand the sanitation situation. So we have done rapid household questionnaires across each and every family residing, in each and every settlement. So we already had the infrastructure mapped. We also had some basic data about each family, which we had put together on the GIS platform and published it so that we could very, very strategically and very accurately target houses who wanted a household toilet. So since we had this data, we said, let's build upon this. And we ran an entire new survey form, which really focused on housing and their aspirations. Here, I would like to mention that luckily for Kolhapur, the 44 settlements that we decided to choose were all on government land out of 57, which cover almost 83% of the city's poor. So the bulk of the poor were on government land. And so we decided to pick that up in this particular study. So what we did was we collected a lot of data and then created a vulnerability matrix. The vulnerability matrix was created around some of the key points like land, what were the kind of reservations, was it a tenable or untenable settlement, land values, we had dwellings, we had densities, the structural conditions, what was the average area per person, things like that. And of course, socio-economic conditions that we also included in this matrix. And we gave a score. And slums which were above 20 in their overall score were the most vulnerable. Between 15 and 20 were kind of vulnerable, and below 15 were the least vulnerable. So as you can see in this map, all the 44 slums have been laid out, and you know which one are the most vulnerable, and the vulnerability index can be very clearly seen. So I would like to say that we've come out with this report. Anyone who's interested should really take a look at it. It's on our website. It's in the public domain. I would really invite all of you to take a look at it. So we applied all these parameters even to Bondrinagar. So if you look at Bondrinagar, the first photo, you'll see that the yellow line shows how the land, how it shrunk. And the second photograph shows you the community being completely involved in designing, these tenements, understanding what it would mean. If you say 200 square feet or 300 square feet, people don't understand. So we did life scale, sketches on the ground for them to understand those spaces. And the community took some significant decisions. In this case, they realized that they wanted to include everyone. So they said, we will share land. We will share it equally. They were willing to, get themselves registered under a cooperative housing society. They even took responsibility for their own transit camp. And because we also believe in multi-stakeholder approach, and we work very, very intensively with urban local bodies, we also paved way for a dialogue between the government and as well as the people. So in the third photograph, you can see it's the municipal commissioner who came and actually had meetings with them in their community. And I think by the end of it, they were all convinced that a high-rise thing would have never worked here. And what we were looking at was probably very practically and contextually the most appropriate thing to do at that point of time. So with Bondrinagar, these are some of the statistics. I mean, this is a layout which is conforming to the town planning norms. And I mean, each family gets about 382 square feet of built up area and 45 square feet of super built up area, which includes a little bit, some terrace space, a common shared backyard. And of course, what I liked about the PMAY was security of land tenure, because that comes right at the outset. Unless you have that happening, you will not be able to take it forward. So they all have their satbaras, which is the piece of paper that you require in Maharashtra for ownership. So each of those plots has been transferred to them. Now this land was it belonged to the state government. So the collector had ownership of this piece of land. So it had to be transferred to individual families. I think this is probably the only project where the number of people after joint verification went down instead of going up. From 84, it went down to 77 because they were, we already had a lot of data in place. And so it was quite easy for the urban local body, the PMAY cell of the city, to jointly verify it and then freeze the numbers. And as Sandhya has already said, there are some things that you just don't compromise on. And for us, ample light, ventilation is something that we just were very clear that there would be no compromise on that. These are some of the renders. I mean, this project is a work in progress. This is what we think it will look like when it's done. There is a cost breakdown that we've given here. Our initial idea was that just like we've done our sanitation programs on a cost sharing model, where the cities invested in laying drainage network, and through CSR funds we were able to raise sufficient funds to buy material and give it to the beneficiary at their doorstep, and people invested in their own construction. There was a cost-sharing model which worked really well in our sanitation project, and we were hoping something similar can be tried out here. But raising funds through CSR has been pretty tough, and I'm glad Sandhya has already highlighted the immense challenges that we all face when it comes to raising funds, and the reluctance of formal financial institutes to lend to the poor. So I would say here, since we work even very closely with the elected members, we were lucky that the MLA from Kolhapur took a very keen interest in this project, and with this help, we were able to negotiate. We are, talking to one of the banks over there, not just talking, they've already started the process in full earnest, and we are sort of making compliances where they will be giving loans to the beneficiary families, which would be like 2,75,000. Under PMAY, of course, they would get 2,50,000, and through beneficiary and CSR contribution, additionally, we are trying to sort of make it up to another 50,000 per house, because the total cost per house is roughly around 5,75,000. So this is the way we are hoping that this project would pan out, where we at least give people a shell, a livable shell, which then they can finish, with the choices of their own material and finishes. So we've started this work on the ground. We've had, luckily, the tranches of PMAY coming in. The state government has already released 1 lakh of rupees, 1.6 lakhs actually, 1 lakh from the state government, and 60,000 from the government of India has already come in. So these are some of the photographs of the site. You can see it's under construction, and it's coming up well. So far, so good. So I thought in my last slide, I would like to really highlight the challenges that we faced in putting this whole thing together. It took us 5 years just to move the DPR from the city to the state government. So from 2017, we've been engaging with the municipal corporation. There are 3 municipal commissioners who've come and gone. And I'm sure all of you probably realize that, when there's a change of administrative head, things can change quite a bit. You sometimes need to start all over again. Of course, some good things also come out of it. Like, for instance, I think one good thing that happened was that this project shifted from affordable to beneficiary-led construction. And the municipal commissioner at that point of time was very keen for it to be under BLC, for the simple reason that he said that once the land is made out to them, then it is theirs, forever. Whereas under affordable housing, had we done this, it would have been transferred to the cooperative society on a lease basis. And he said then, after every 30 years or 40 years, people would have to go through this whole struggle of renewing the lease, and you don't know what the situation will be at that point of time. So I think overall that decision worked out well. And so it got chosen on, it made it through under the BLC component of RAY. But the challenges really for us were getting government departments to talk to each other. Getting the collector's office and the municipal commissioner's office coming together, making decisions was one of the huge challenges, because I think all of us know that most of the departments work in silos, and there's very little synergy. And this is something that we faced in almost all the cities that we worked. So there's hardly any convergence in the decision-making process. And of course, then the delay of transfer of land also was because of these bureaucratic delays. Delay in registration of the land. And one thing that came out very clearly was that there was absolutely lack of clarity as to how these things should happen. So even the government officers struggled with it. A simple example was when they had to do the Dastan Nondani, or the registration of that land. in Kolhapur city, there was no clarity on how one goes about it for this kind of a project. We had to go to the state, talk to the IGR, and figure out a way of doing this. And, so bringing in all the different levels of government to come and take decisions becomes really, really very tricky and very difficult. So that was one thing that I feel needs to be clear, needs to be laid out. And only then people will even venture out and try and, take benefit of schemes like this, especially when you talk of BLC, where an individual is on his own. There were also surprisingly a lack of clarity on the disbursement of the PMAY tranches, because there was a particular understanding which the PMAY cell locally had. But when we spoke to MHADA, there was a different picture that we got there. So trying to get them to, to understand and come to a joint kind of an understanding was also pretty tricky. So we find that we are sort of running between the city and the state government quite often for more clarity on the disbursement of tranches, because it is apparently not the same as it is for housing which comes under the affordable vertical. So I've just highlighted some of the very key challenges that we face, and I'm sure everybody is facing them, but this really needs to be addressed. So what we have tried to do is we have started putting together a toolkit, which is a dynamics toolkit that we are putting together. So you'll find it's already published on our website. So up till the DPR process, we have come out with, how can one go about this process? We've also, and of course, we will keep updating it, because as we are implementing the process, what are the kind of challenges that come about, and what are the kind of compliances that communities have to make in order to, ensure that the project timelines don't suffer and their paperwork is done in time. So we hope to make very detailed documentations of that. We've also put out our citywide slum rehabilitation strategies, which looks at Kolhapur and comes out with, how one should go about it. I know Housing for All has a lot of those components already mentioned in it, but we find that probably the DPRs, first of all, in Maharashtra, I haven't seen them in the public domain, and we are not very sure whether it is being followed as per the guidelines. But we thought, let us make an effort to put it down, because I think a vulnerability index is so important. A city must work backwards from the most vulnerable and see how you can bring them into the secure tenure ambit. And that often is not the case, because the projects happen in silos on a case-to-case basis, and land is such a precious resource that unless you have a bird's eye view of the total situation, one is never going to come out with optimal ways of using this very scarce resource optimally. So I'm sure, if you go through the citywide slum rehabilitation strategies, we've even fleshed out certain examples, of how maybe, the communities can be clubbed in some situations, or maybe, they just need to do an in situ rehabilitation. So a menu of options that they can, think of, because the situation is different from settlement to settlement. So I just think I'll stop there, Mani, because I hope there will be more questions coming up later. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Pratima ji. Like I've been witness to this Bondre Nagar site a couple of years back, when the residents were still living in their earlier houses. I was there just last month. I could see the progress and like phenomenal work. I'm just hoping that we'll get to see the completed project inauguration pretty soon, which is what you're working towards. All the best for that. Thank you very much. And on that note, Ashish ji, welcome to share your presentation. And I can tell, basis the time which we have consumed, we'll probably run a few minutes more than what we are scheduled. Attendees, I'm just giving you a heads up on that. Ashish ji, over to you. You are on mute, Ashish. Yeah,
Yeah.
now it's.
Yeah. Thank you, Kirti sir, and thank you, Mani sir. I will be presenting a case study of Sholapur called Raynagar. So basically, we are working on one of the biggest economically weaker section project, or probably PMAY's country's biggest project in Sholapur for around 30,000 houses. Now, a project for constructing 30,000 houses under Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana project, and basically for unorganized workers within the city of Sholapur, being constructed at village Kumbari. Now, of course, majority of you know that PMAY projects are typically located in urban component or urban areas. But this is the only project which is located 5 kilometers from municipal corporation limit outside the city. But it was, as a special case, was sanctioned under Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana. There is a federation called Raynagar Federation, which was formed under banner of Apex cities, and almost 833 buildings of G+2 structure was planned. The purpose of even keeping this G+2 is to keep low maintenance and ensure that the beneficiaries are from poor class and cannot afford lift and related maintenance building. This is the present status of project, where we are about to complete around 15,000 houses, and all these 15,000 houses will be handed over at the end of November or first week of December at the hands of Honorable Prime Minister. Since this was Honorable Prime Minister's dream project of handing over 30,000 houses, it got very much importance. And this is, you can see the orange part where we are located, and the red line which shows the corporation limit. So we faced a lot of challenges basically while getting the project approval for infrastructure, for funding, a lot of things. The project has been planned in 3 phases, that is phase 1 of 10,000 dwelling units, phase 2 of 10,000 dwelling units, and again phase 3 of 10,000 dwelling units. Now, the major hitches which we faced is permissions to execute the project. Since the entire land of Raynagar project is in green zone, after constant follow-up, the government of Maharashtra issued a separate GR on 14 March and allowed this EWS and PMAY project to be constructed on green zone along with permissible FSIF1. This was one of the most crucial support for Raynagar project. Again, another major support which we got from government of Maharashtra is stamp duty, 1% stamp duty, because that was one of the crucial point. Government of Maharashtra waived of stamp duty dwelling unit to 1,000 rupees only, and also waived the measurement fees to 50%. The another major challenge was getting the water for the project, because as I said, Raynagar project is located 5 kilometers from Sholapur Municipal Corporation limit, and already Sholapur itself is facing a challenge of water shortage. Already Sholapur gets every 3 days water, so they doesn't have enough water, and how to bring the water for the entire project was a major challenge. Only the sustainable source was Ujni Dam, from where we can bring the water, but it is again 85 kilometers from the project. So the anticipated cost of the water line and the entire water project was around 235 crore, which is again would have been put burden on the project, and as simultaneously would have put the burden on beneficiaries also. So the district collector and the Maharashtra Jeevan Pradhikaran both played a vital role here, and a feasibility report was worked out that where we can get water from adjoining areas. Sholapur has one of the major NTPC plant, and NTPC plant of around 133 megawatt plant is there. So for dedicated 144 MLD water line was put up from Ujni Dam to NTPC. So that was we anticipated and we calculated that although the NTPC plant is working at its full strength also, they have additional water of around 50 mld. And so NTPC can give us around 24 mld water to Renagar. But there was again, as we all are discussing, there were government departments works in silos. So NTPC was little bit reluctant to give water. And again, Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs and Prime Minister's Office has to intervene to get this 24 mld water. So NTPC agreed to give 24 mld water, but again asked us to give 16 mld treated water back, and which again costed us to put an SBI technology STP to the site. Another issue was home loan. We all discussed that PMAY project, the home loan was major issue, and we have to ensure that the EM of the housing loan should be less than the rent presently they are paying. But we were working on this project. In fact, the whole project ideology, this project was again in part of AHP, affordable housing under. So the whole land is purchased by the beneficiaries, and this Renagar has again 6 different various societies, which has around the beneficiaries of around 40 to 44,000 beneficiaries. But again, they were from the poor class, so it was very difficult to get the loans. Here, the Prime Minister's office came in and intervened to get the loan. But again, the issue was banking procedures were major hurdle, because each bank has its own standard operating procedures. They were asking certain CIBIL score and the income proof. All the 3 were major issues. So district administration helped here to give income proof in a way like Tahsildar's Dakhla or Tahsildar's income certificate was asked to be accepted as a income certificate. And even people who have less than 500 CIBIL score would be applicable for this housing loan. So all the banks were even directed to set up centralized processing facility at Solapur. What just now Pratima Madam was also saying, we also faced the same thing while registering the documents, because initially we were planning for handing over 10,000 houses, and for these 10,000 people we have to do bank loan, do their agreement to sell, and register the mortgage deed. So Solapur has only 3 or 4 sub-register office, and apart from Renagar there were a lot of registrations happening. So it was a very difficult challenge to get this agreement to sell and mortgage deeds to be executed. But the district administration played a vital role and opened 2 dedicated sub-register office exclusively for Renagar in the premises of Renagar. So these help us for the registration of documents. Now, these were the snapshots how the loan melas were conducted, and Bank of Maharashtra, then 7 nationalized banks came in for supporting the home loans also. Another issue was providing the infrastructure. As I said, we are located 5 kilometers from the municipal corporation limit area. So we were not able to get AMRUT 2 programs or AMRUT 2 funding. But since the entire project was planned on urban scale, so we want the funding for water supply or sewerage or solid waste management under AMRUT 2 and Swachh Bharat Mission. So these were major problem, and since the another major commitment required at Ministry of Housing was for AMRUT 2, it should be any urban local body. Now Renagar itself is a typically Gram Panchayat area, and it is not an urban local body. So again, PMO came, intervene and asked us to create a urban local body, and circular has been already issued for creation of Kumbhari itself as a Nagar Panchayat. So finally, the conclusive remarks is basically Renagar Federation, for executing such 30,000 housing projects, you need a lot of interdepartmental coordination is very much required. Secondly, while preparing the DPRs, what Pratima ji was just saying, while preparing the DPRs, deep insight has to be gone. We ourselves faced Rainagar DPR when it was prepared. The water was considered from some other source which doesn't have sustainable water source sufficient. And then when you start executing the project, you face a lot of issues. So while preparing DPR, a lot of interventions has to go on. And again, the support of district administration or the state government administration is very much required in such kinds of projects. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Ashish ji. Like, yeah, so I should be happy at this because we've seen it from the first tower, which was kind of more model house, to even see this kind of progress has been quite phenomenal. We've seen the whole fight with arranging loans and the tough negotiations on rates and the whole exercise, thanks to the support of the PMO and the district collector to kind of bring in nationalized banks to play a very active role. We have been witness to this from very close quarters. So again, as I said for the other couple of projects, like this is all there happening as we speak, and we need to congratulate them and all the other supporters to actually have done quite a bit on that. Ashish ji, like I clearly know that in the Rainagar project, the district administration has been playing a very key role in actually on the convergence and trying to get things which are not normally part of the project. So maybe you should highlight that a bit more. Thanks.
Yeah, as I said, apart from housing loan, the district collector played a phenomenal role. He used to take every week meetings, and since this is a PMO pet project, there were a lot of interventions from PMO also. The deputy secretary from PMO himself comes to site constantly to ensure things are happening on site. And getting a water was a big challenge. To get a pin from NTPC is such a big challenge, and you are getting 24 ml water from their own balancing tank was a major challenge, which Honorable Collector played a big role there. Even the Chief Secretary, Honorable Chief Secretary himself supported us, because when the projects were ready and its tendering was done, and we don't have money and we are asking for the AMRUT 2 funds, and AMRUT 2 Government of India said you should be an urban local body, you are located outside. So we were in absolutely such a scenario where at one point of time our DPR is ready, our 10,000 houses were ready, and now if we were asked to reduce the water consumption and completely change the plumbing lines was not possible, because drainage system has to function. So all these were challenges, but because of even Chief Secretary's support, we could get that also.
Yeah, so I can just say that where there is a will, there is a way is what we can clearly understand from the Sholapur project. Request to the attendees is like you can keep posting your questions in the Q&A section. We have kind of answered most of the questions real time on the chat box itself. You can continue it coming. My next question probably will be to Sandhya ji. Like you did touch upon the operations and maintenance aspect of the community of the project. Your first 33 houses are ready. 1 year they've been living. The normal thing which we hear is like getting these houses built is a challenge in itself, but then the larger challenge is how do we get it to maintain? So you want to elaborate on that? Thank you.
Thank you, Mani. One of the things that we focused on very, very intentionally was the maintenance part. And that's one is, I mean, of course, we've had, we've been speaking to you and you've been flagging this from the very beginning, but also from our experience working in a public housing project in Mumbai. And as an extension of that, visiting other neighborhoods, we saw that what a huge challenge it can be, especially changing the urban environment of families who have lived on a ground floor level and then now they're in a multi-story space. It's a lot to grapple with for them. So while the construction was going on, we initiated conversations around what it means to maintain and
and what it means for the society that was already registered. I do want to point out that this was a unique situation where the societies have been, for each of the building, have been registered even before the construction started. Because that helped a lot in building that capacity within these families. So it's helped, the participatory process early on definitely helped. And then we carried that through in this. And this community being so diverse also proved to be challenging at the same time, because we were dealing with different cultural and social issues depending on which group of families we were speaking to. So now we are in the process of, creating a more formal, robust system. And through this, I've learned that it's actually a policy course that you can do for for society maintenance. And we're working with INHAF and the Aga Khan Habitat for Development to figure out how to translate that in a way that it's even more accessible for the marginalized communities.
Thank you, Sandhya. Like Pratima ji, like as we await, like we do await another version of Housing for All in some shape and form, hopefully next year. So what would you think would be a recipe? Like we know it's not one solution fits all, but then tier 2 kind of cities, like what would be your recipe of success for those?
Well, I think the broad overlying principles are the same, whether it's a tier 1 or tier 2. I mean, you must have all the data laid out very clearly. I mean, I think one of the first things that any urban local body should really be focusing on is first creating accurate demarcations, of the land which is occupied by the slums, to understand how much of it really belongs to whom. There is just so much dispute sometimes in land ownership and the extent of the land itself, that you suddenly run into problems when you assume it's something and it actually turns out to be something. So I think when you do DPRs, demarcation should be accurately given by given by the government. They must have data of each slum. They must have spatial data of each slum, and they must have a vulnerability index. I mean, as I said in my presentation, like unless you have a bird's eye view of what you're really going to be working with, you will continue to make mistakes. You will continue to come out with solutions which are inconsistent with ground realities. So the state governments, I mean, I'm just hoping that these the toolkits that we are preparing could be, a reference document be used by maybe the tier 2 cities to begin with, so that they can start establishing, what is the extent of the issues within their own city. And one thing one has to bear in mind here is that tier 2 cities have a better chance of overcoming some of their challenges, because even today, the poor comprise less than maybe 10% of the overall population. Maybe in a city like Mumbai, they are already beyond the tipping point, and it's going to be really, really very challenging. But at least here, if they can come out with holistic solutions, and there's more convergence of all the departments, once they know the land ownership, once they know that whom they have to negotiate with, because not every government land is also available. The railway lands or the defense lands are always very big challenges for people, to acquire and to bring it under housing. So I think a very clear picture should be first established, and there needs to be political and administrative will for making these things come together. Because I found that in our Sangli project, there at one point of time, all of it came together. And so the people knew that we were all speaking in one voice. There weren't people taking advantage of the situation and, bringing down the project. So this, I think, is an extremely important thing, where you have people coming together, collaborating, and then looking at their city in totality, and then coming out with a realistic solution. And including the poor right from the beginning is a must. It's such a top-down approach otherwise, which, I mean, in the long run, it never proves to be sustainable. So I just feel that some of these principles need to be followed very scrupulously when you look at social housing for the poor.
Thanks, Pratima ji. I see Rohit has a question for you. Ujjwala, can you make Rohit a panelist so that he can ask it directly?
Yes, sure. Let me just.
Rohit Lavati. The question is right there, Pratima ji. Like you can see while he comes on. Like, yeah, he's here.
Hello, I am audible.
Yes, Rohit, you are audible. Go ahead. Okay, not anymore. So I am going to read out your question to Pratima. Sorry. Question from
Hello?
Rohit is this. That, yeah, go ahead, Rohit.
Yeah. Hi, Mani. Hi, Pratima. So I'm so sorry for the disturbance in the background.
No, that's a
Yeah. So my question actually was on the. Okay, I'm in the metro. I'm so sorry for the announcement. Okay, my question, Pratima ma'am, was basically on the tenure security aspect. So you particularly mentioned on how title was an important factor in getting the access to loans and finance, right? So often we see there is often de facto tenure security or partial tenure security in settlements, right? Where they don't essentially have a title, but they might have like what Pani Haq Samiti is doing in Mumbai, for example, where they have an access to water now from BMC, but they might not have a legal sort of a ownership or some kind of a claim to the land and the houses, right? So in cases where you have partial tenure security, should the first step be towards mobilizing community to get security of tenure and then move towards community-led redevelopment? So just a little bit on that. Sorry for the disturbance again. Thank you.
Thanks, Rohit. I hope you can hear me. You're absolutely right. That's one thing which I liked about the Prime Minister's Awas Yojana is that they insist on complete tenure security before they even process your papers and your application, which was not the case in the previous 3 housing projects that we have done. I mean, we've done one under Valmiki Ambedkar Awas Yojana, we've done one under the Jawaharlal Nehru Urban Renewal Mission. I mean, all these projects are standing, but till date, there has not been a single piece of paper, which says that whether it's a lease deed or a Satbara. I mean, there's been no transfer of ownership of land for any of these projects. But in this case, what I liked about it is because they transferred the land in this particular case to every individual house got their own plots. Everybody knew which is going to be their house. So that also helps, when the project is coming up. I know this land has been granted. I have Pakka papers because it's also been registered now with the IGR. So it's a complete process that we've taken them through. Nobody can, can ever take that piece of land away from them. But even in the construction stages, subsequently, there are no gray areas. So people really then monitor the construction as it's coming up because they know these are their walls, this is their house which is coming up. So I find that very interesting how people, get very involved in that process. So yes, but that is where I think that's one of the differentiating factors between PMAY and all the other government schemes that we've had so far, that security of tenure has to be established right at the outset.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Yes. Thank you.
Thank you. Kirti Bhai wants to say something. Like Kirti Bhai, yeah, please come in. You are on mute, Kirti Bhai, please.
No, I was just wondering if everyone is over, and I think before I do some thank you, I wanted to ask you questions. So
I just had one point. Yeah, we are almost done. There is a question from Pratik, which I think Sandhya needs to answer on the main chat itself. It's not on the Q&A.
Yeah, Pratik has asked a few questions, but I couldn't put it in because there were other chats that were in there.
Yeah, so I can read one of the questions, like how we can control the later part of slum. because many slum redevelopment projects are not working properly. I think the question is more like how to ensure the slums do not remain slums, or it's not occupied by others.
Yeah, that question wasn't clear to me about later part of slums. So I guess if we could make, Pratik had 2 or 3 questions, maybe he can ask one of them if we could get him into the chat, to the conversation.
Yeah, so Ujjwala, can you just check if we can bring Pratik online? Yeah, so if we can make him a panelist, he can ask the question directly. While you do that, I have a question to Ashish about the whole technology innovation in Raynagar project. Like, Ashish ji, you want to kind of elaborate on the technology innovation, construction technology innovation that you have quite successfully used in Raynagar project?
Yeah, basically what we are adopting is we are using My1 technology. So My1 technology is quite a new technology, and it can construct larger houses. When only thing is, the only issue with My1 is when you have more number of houses, it is feasible. When you have less number of houses, it doesn't make economically viable.
Okay, great. Yeah, thanks. I've been witness to that again, so I'll probably qualify it. Like, despite all the challenges with the increasing construction costs, both on material side and on the labor side in recent times, Raynagar has managed to keep the cost of the unit, and as a result, beneficiary contribution constant, which is a phenomenal achievement. And a substantial portion of that goes to a combination of things: the conviction of the project proponents not to alter the beneficiary share, and of course, leveraging technology extensively, which has kind of contributed to help them maintain, because bulk of their investment is on capital equipment, which they had already done initially. So they have the shutters, machinery, and equipment already in place. So the variability on costs is relatively limited for them. Pratik ji, over to you, your question to Sandhya.
Thank you, first of all.
Can you hear Pratik? I can't hear him.
Yeah.
No, you're not audible, Pratik.
Am I audible now?
Yes.
Okay, thanks. I was just saying thanks for the wonderful webinar. It was very interesting and informative. So one question I had is like, so many people, like you mentioned how you are using environmental aspects also, and आपने बोला कि ऐसा ownership नहीं होना चाहिए कि इनको ही solve करना है climate change और इनकी building से, because we are the one who, the privileged people have should take the ownership. But do you think in the near future one can use urban techniques to make slum redevelopment buildings? Because as you have used those bamboos and all, do you think in near future there is any chance? And the other question was around the maintenance only. Do you think that like I have heard like many during our college time also, teachers used to say many masters have failed in the slum redevelopment. How you folks will take this project for a thesis topic? So I was just curious to know that we have seen like many in the later part, how we have think with respect to the architecture is evolved or changed in a way that we didn't expected. So उसका कितना सोचना पड़ता है उस level पे? That's what I was asking.
Okay. Thank you for the questions, Pratik. So to answer the first part about incorporating climate resiliency, climate adaptations, whatever, there are many phrases for this, sustainability, etc. There hasn't been enough of an effort to actually, enough of a not effort, but we are not there yet that it's entirely affordable, when we talk about building for the marginalized, which is why I said that we need external support to find solutions and find ways of doing this. Now, the other part is we are also very careful about not propagating any one technology, because if you look at this particular slum in Sanjay Nagar, we're sitting on black cotton soil. So our foundation is 9 meters deep. for a 3-story, for a ground plus 2-story building. So there are these, so that's why we kind of, are very careful about how we talk about sustainability or talk about how these could be solutions across the board. Can we continue using earthen technology and bamboo? That is, again, I think needs to be done in a very thoughtful and in a very intentional manner, because we all know the effects of eroding topsoil as well. So the question becomes, what would be the volume of construction or the amount that we want to use it. It's very successful when you look at individual homes. If you look at low density communities where they're really close to soil that could be used. The bamboo, we did try and see, how it could work out for the buildings itself, and we might potentially look at other materials for the remaining 7 buildings. So far, it's performed well, so it's something we need to watch. For your second question about later part of the slum, so what we have consistently seen across the board is the fact that the families for whom we are building, we do not take the time to ask them, what do they want their homes to be like, to look like. The projects that we are talking about as case studies here, that is the attempt we're making. So it is an assumption that we're saying that because these questions have not been asked, because they haven't been involved in the designing and the building of their homes, is why they don't have the sense of ownership. Having said that, I might be completely wrong. 10 years down the line, we might actually discover it's something else. So at this point in time, we are pushing for maximum participation and looking, working with marginalized in an equitable and equal manner, and see what results it can yield. 1 year on, this building is in great, is being maintained really well. It's in great shape. Like I said, we don't need to make appointments. You can show up anytime and you will find it spick and span, really well maintained, and the community takes great pride in it. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you very much for the answers.
Thank you, Sandhya. On that note, I think I'll thank all the panelists and for this wonderful discussion. I think the main request I have for all the participants is please try and visit all of these 3 projects. Like what they could express here did do justice, but then a visit to these 3 sites would be a huge learning for all of you. All of them are very welcoming in terms of hosting you and taking you to the project. So please try and do that. And on that note, thanks to all participants, attendees, panelists. Over to Kirti Bhai. Thank you.
No, I think I just wanted to thank all of you, and it has been hugely learning experience. I think I have sat through this entire session and learned a lot. I thought, 50 years of learning on my part was not enough. And I think, this was a very, very, very useful thing. I just wanted to make a few observations, though. Because the path we are trading, I think it's not easy. It's complicated. And it's very difficult. And I want to do that in the context of 5 or 6 things that, and I'll not take more time, that I'm beginning to understand in the context of housing. My dear friend Rakesh Mohan, I think, we've been working together for several years. And he said, my advantage, Kirti, is this, that, I look at housing very abstractly. I'm an economist. You have a disadvantage that you're an architect. You understand sociology. You talk about participation. You talk about, housing finance. You talk about policy. And I said there are multiple you that is involved. And I really think it's very necessary that we become multiple us while we do this. And I'll tell you why. And we are not. I'll just give you a small example. I was in Leh when government of India had decided to do something to lay down. And the group which was opposing it said it very beautiful in a meeting. He said, tragedy about Pakka building is this is the last too long. They'll be there for 17, 8 years. And we don't see any reason why you should impose poverty of yours at this point of time to impose for 80 years on the city of law. What they were talking about was this. That you've got to be very, very careful about what we build when we build Pakka houses. Because they constitute a very important part of your city landscape. As a matter of fact, I'm going Calcutta day after tomorrow to talk on the same subject. And what I'm saying is that what is the impact that this kind of houses have on city landscape? And this is not elitist thing at all. And I'll tell you why it's not elitist. Russians say they play music in their cow sheds, in their tabela, and cows give more milk. If cows are sensitive to environment, if cows are sensitive to what is around them and has effect on the productivity, I'm sure there's a great, people are more sensitive when it comes to understanding the factors which constitute a shelter. This is the second important point I would like to kind of make. And I'm please don't misunderstand me. I'm just trying to bring an additional point to what has been said. Third point I want to make is this, that no one talks about this, and I think it is required to be talked. As a matter of fact, I will have to go back to Sandhya and find out how it works, because I saw in Sandhya's project fairly large corridor spaces. And large corridor spaces obviously comes at the expense of individual spaces, because ultimately you are spending on the overall construction you're doing. And as an architect, when I do, I think, and I'm just while I'm talking, I'm designing a very expensive garden building, and we're discussing the size of the corridor. So point I'm trying to kind of make is this, that the whole balancing that you do between public and private, between shared and individual, is a very sensitive, very important decision, both in the context of economy, in the context of overall thing. The fourth small little point, I think, which didn't come up at all, and I understand why it wouldn't come up, is the size of the house. Now, I know it's given, but let me tell you a small story. And I go on telling the story because I thought it's an incredibly interesting story coming from a politician. This was several years ago in Sri Lanka, immediately after tsunami. I was there for a month doing some work, and the minister had called a meeting in order to discuss what kind of housing should government of Sri Lanka do after tsunami. I was there, I was invited, and I made, as is my habit, observation saying, I'm coming from Gujarat. We have recently done a major rehabilitation effort after the earthquake. World Bank says it's one of the best, I think, rehabilitation effort anywhere. We built, 180 square foot houses, incremental, this, that. I was very surprised to look at the reaction of the minister. He said, Mr. Shah, if this is what you come here to advise, please take the first possible flight and go home. I said, why are you so reactive? He said, you must understand house in the context of a family. It builds culture, it builds people, it builds, I think, citizens of tomorrow. And therefore, we as a country has decided we will never build anything less than 550 square feet, whatever is the reason, whatever is the context. And I'm not saying that we got to build 550 square foot house. What I'm trying to kind of say is that we've got to look at the size in the context of what you do with it. Give a small example. I was in one of the small towns 2 weeks ago and went to the affordable housing project. And I happened to talk to the parents who live in that house. And I came back with an absolutely clear understanding that they were very frustrated. They were very frustrated because they felt they were a burden on their children because they were occupying a space. Now, a house which makes my parents guilty that they are here in the city, something's wrong with that. And I'm saying in the context of design and the context in the context of detailing, in the context of how do you kind of enlarge spaces? And my last little kind of point is this, that participation essentially is a big battle. Big battle in the sense that we try and kind of, put values, try and kind of, involve people, try and kind of, build social capital, try and kind of see that a process of putting bricks and concrete together is much more than just the shelter. And I think it's a very important contribution that civil society is making, people like us are making. I personally feel time also has come to kind of go beyond, and I don't think this is the kind of session where one could elaborate on that. But what does this participatory process mean? Like, say, for instance, someone was telling me the day before that if you buy a 5 crore rupee apartment in Bangalore, you don't have a choice of a neighbor. You just get what is given to you. You don't have a choice. And that's 5 crore rupees of investment, several generations. So small little kind of point I'm making, I think, out of this is taking this wonderful debate, this tremendous amount of work that Sandhya and Pratima ji and Ashish are doing, in terms of asking more questions, that we still have to ask many more questions. And not only ask many more questions, really find many more solutions and answers. Because we are working against, we don't have enough space. We don't have enough money. We do not have, I think, enough capital. We do not have enough, maintenance, I think. We don't have choice that we could use materials which would, and I think, all those multiple questions need to be asked. And I'm asking them, believe me. That is why there's a competition called Improving Livability of Small Houses. 3rd season is over, and I'm very, very unsatisfied in terms of the reasons. It's not easy to answer them, but I think it's very important that we ask those questions, because we are talking about generational investment. Houses we build, probably 3 generations will live. Children will get culture from that place. And therefore, what do you do with it? It's very, very important. And there is no escape from answering that question, because we are creating those spaces. We are providing those solutions, and we are in charge of solutions. So I thought, and I'll just use this opportunity to share some of my concerns, which are part of 50 years of learning and not having found answers. I was just writing a paper just last month, just 1 more minute, on our Vasna project with 2,250 families and an absolutely incredibly rich experience. And I said, oh my goodness, I think, there's so much that we did better, that everything is around, all the 2,050 houses around courtyards, that we refused to build multi-story building, that there was a kind of, a municipal commissioner who said resources were managed by an NGO or all that. And I'm saying it's going back and forth. And I think we've got to kind of find collectively a way on all this aspect together. How do you move forward? And that is where this collectivism, this sharing, I think is very, very important. And it's that context that, I'm sharing this. I'll be very worried, Ashish, when I go and see this 30,000 houses. I saw the photograph and I'll be very, very worried. What are we doing? What kind of cities are we creating? Why are the cities in the West are so beautiful that we really aim at? And even if you're working at the lower end, is there a way to contribute to that particular process happening? This, I think, are very important questions need to be asked, because otherwise we will end up doing, well, I think we'll solve one problem, we'll create 3 others in the process and bargain. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kirti bhai. Like, I think we'll all sit in a huddle with you, like, take all this inspiration and try and implement these suggestions.
You're mute. Manik, you're mute.
Was I not audible? Hello?
You're
audible.
Ji.
I can hear you.
Yeah. I'm not on mute, sir.
Mute.
Okay, on that note,
Mute,
I
bhaiya.
think everybody else hears it, sir. Sorry.
Yeah,
So
so-
I'll continue with-
Oh, he's not able to hear it. I don't know. Can you hear me, Kirti ji?
Yes, we can.
Oh, so I think it's yeah.
So in between, like you had, so you had gone on your mode of giving us your gyan, which we will continue to receive, and that's our objective as well. But then on that note, like I would bring this session to a close. Thank you very much, Kirti ji. Thank you very much, panelists. And thank you very much, all the attendees. Thanks for your time and patient hearing. Thank you very much. And a shout out to Studio INHAF, Ujjwala there behind the screen, really holding and putting this together. Thank you very much. Thanks. Have a nice weekend. Bye.
Mani, thank you very much. Pratima ji, I understand you will do the second one, right?
Yes.
I'm not the one satisfied with one. Sandhya, thank you very much. It's wonderful
Thank you
work, and
very
I think
much.
want to come.
Thank you very much. Thanks a lot, Sandhya and Ashish ji. And of course, Mani, I've always been able to count on you, but I thought you all made fabulous presentations, and you're doing fabulous work. All the best, all of you. And I hope we'll all see the projects when they get completed. All of us will visit it.
Yes.
Yeah, in fact,
Ashish bhai, बात करनी है इसके बाद.
I invite all of you to be in Solapur in the month of November, when we will be handing over first 15,000 houses. So it's a big event and one of the big projects. Do come down
Thank you
to
very much.
see.
Will do. Thank you.
Thank you, Mani. Thank you, Mani. Thank you, Sandhya. Thank you, Pratima. Thank you, Ashish. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.